That fracture line is usually small at first. It can look like a casual question over coffee, a long pause after you mention an old mistake, or someone remembering exactly what made you flinch last week. That is the awkward part. Most people do not realize they are being studied until the pattern is already there. While you are working on discipline, someone else may be watching for weakness. Not to learn from your progress, but to locate the private lever that moves you. They do not need a public confrontation. They need shame, or approval, or regret, or loneliness. Sometimes all they need is that one reflex that makes you abandon your own judgment just to get relief. That is what a psychological predator looks for. Not your strengths first. Your openings. The hairline crack in the self that can be widened quietly from the inside. Stockdale understood the deeper danger. Force is not always required when a person can be pushed into self-betrayal. So the real threat is rarely the loud enemy. It is the attentive one. The one who seems warm while taking inventory. What follows is simple and useful. 7 signs they are mapping you, and the Stoic defenses that deny them entry. 1 rule first. Never reveal a fresh wound to someone who has not earned access to your private world. That private world matters because access is the whole game. The fresh wound is only the beginning. Once you stop giving people unearned entry, you start seeing that real protection is less about looking tough and more about running a stable interior. Most people think safety means becoming colder, louder, or harder to approach. Stoicism cuts the other way. The strongest defense is not performance. It is governance. Your mind is territory. Your inner citadel is not a public square, and not everyone gets a key. That changes the question in a useful way. You stop asking how to beat them at their game. You ask what inside you they are trying to recruit against you. That is where the dichotomy of control becomes practical. Their motives are not yours to run. Their style is not yours to run. But your disclosures are yours. Your impulses are yours. Your hunger for approval is yours. Your reactions under pressure are yours. That sounds simple, but in real life it can feel awkward because self-command is quieter than performance. Still, that is what predators hate most. The moment they see you cannot be bribed by praise or cornered by emotion. They lose the map. Sign 1. They collect your past like a prosecutor. That data is not destiny. The old story only has power if it still lives in your nervous system like an active threat. Once you see that, you start noticing a certain kind of person who does not ask about your past to understand you. They ask to measure whether it still owns you. Picture a lunch table at work. Someone stirs their coffee and says, "So what really happened back then?" You answer, lightly. Then they lean in and ask whether you still think about that mistake. It sounds casual, but something about it lands wrong. That awkward feeling matters. They are not gathering context. Rather, they are checking whether regret still functions as a leash. Psychological predators do this because the past is efficient. If your identity is still fused to an old failure, they know exactly where to press. A manager brings up your early career mistake right before an important meeting. A relative retells your worst breakup story right when your confidence starts returning. Different setting, same method. They want to know whether the old wound still changes your posture. The Stoic correction is clean. The past is information. not a verdict. As Marcus Aurelius keeps pushing, judgment is the hinge. What happened is fixed. What it means now is still yours. Try a simple response. That was data, not destiny. I care more about how I move now than how I fell then. Then watch for repetition. If they return to the same wound after you answered clearly, log it mentally. They are not remembering. They are extracting. And when the past stops working, they move to something more useful. Your first reaction. Sign 2. They study your first reaction. Your first reaction tells them more than your words do. The moment the past stops working as a lever, they start testing timing, pressure, and reflex. That is why the next move is usually small. Small enough to look accidental, sharp enough to make your body answer before your mind does. An email lands late with a clipped tone. Your chest tightens. Then, in the meeting, someone says, "Did you miss the memo?" And they do not even look embarrassed saying it. They look interested. That awkward heat in the body is the point. They are watching your face before they listen to your answer. The Stoics had a precise name for this. Propatheiai. The first involuntary movement. The flush. The pulse spike. The jolt. A manipulator creates these small frictions to find out whether your nervous system is easy to steer. If you react on the first beat, they learn your timing. They learn how little force it takes to move you off center. You see this at work when someone delays one small task and watches whether you become visibly chaotic. You see it socially when a partner makes a dismissive joke in front of friends and then studies whether you defend, freeze, or start over-explaining. The correction is simple, but not always easy in real life. Take one breath. Drop your shoulders. Answer on the second beat, never the first. Track it if you need to. Did I create a 2-second pause before speaking? Yes or no? And once they realize they cannot easily provoke you, they start looking for what you still crave. Sign 3. They look for what you worship outside yourself. What you still crave becomes the next opening. Once they see they cannot easily provoke you, they stop pushing and start offering. That is when the room changes temperature. The compliment lands a little too perfectly. The invitation feels selective. Then the warmth disappears the second you disappoint them. And suddenly, the whole interaction feels expensive. This is how leverage gets built. Predators watch for attachment to externals such as money, reputation, beauty, access, approval, and belonging. The Stoics called these indifference. That did not mean worthless. It meant they should never sit on the throne. The danger starts when your mood depends on what another person can grant or remove. The moment praise can steer you, they have a handle. The moment status makes you bend, they have a price. You can see it at work when a boss flatters your ambition, then uses visibility and recognition as payment for compliance. You can see it socially when a group makes you feel included only when you echo their values and stay useful. It is subtle, and that is what makes it awkward. Nothing looks openly hostile. You just notice you are editing yourself to keep the door open. The Stoic response is calm and plain. I value the opportunity, but I do not trade self-respect for access. Then run a quick test. Ask yourself what this person could remove from me that would tempt me to violate my principles. Write down the answer. That is the exposed wire. And once they find the wire, they rarely demand betrayal all at once. They start with something smaller. Sign 4. They invite tiny compromises. That smaller request is where the real test begins. Once someone finds the exposed wire, they usually do not pull it hard. They start with something tiny, something easy to excuse, something that lets you tell yourself it is not really about principle. It sounds familiar because the language is always soft. It is not a big deal. Just this once. Do not be so rigid. The request is small, but the precedent is not. That is the trap. A predator is often less interested in the first concession than in what the concession reveals. Are you anchored? Or are you the kind of person who negotiates identity to avoid friction? That is where Stockdale's point becomes painfully practical. The enemy does not need to destroy you outright if you will help with your own corrosion. Stoicism answers with moral purpose. Virtue is the one possession that is actually yours. The moment you trade it for comfort, image, or approval, you are not protecting your citadel anymore. You are leasing it out in pieces. You see it in a friend who pushes you to mock someone privately because that is just how the group talks. You see it in a manager who asks you to blur a number, soften a truth, or accept credit strategically. It feels awkward because the social cost of refusing is immediate. That is exactly why it works. Use a clean line. I can be flexible on method, but not on principle. Then apply the 1-inch rule. If the action requires even a slight reduction in integrity, count it. And if principle does not move you, some people stop pushing and start giving. Sign 5. They use kindness to make you owe them. That offer can feel generous on the surface. After the pressure and small compromise tests, the strategy often gets softer, not cleaner. Instead of pushing, they start helping. Fast replies. Extra favors. Reassuring check-ins. Then one day the emotional invoice shows up. Not every kind act is manipulative, but false generosity is one of the quickest ways to create debt. They do not need your gratitude alone. They want soft obligation. They want that pause before you set a boundary, where you think, I cannot say no after all they have done. That is the real purchase. They are trying to make your self-respect compete with your guilt. You see it when someone keeps doing favors you never asked for, then acts wounded the first time you decline. You see it when a person becomes your rescuer during a hard season, then starts reading your independence as betrayal. The awkward part is that nothing looks openly cruel. It looks caring. That is why so many people miss it. The Stoic answer is self-reliance, not performative distance. You become willing to tolerate a little loneliness rather than become owned by counterfeit care. Solitude is not failure here. It is where your identity stops being diluted by someone else's expectations. Use a clean response. I appreciate what you did, and my boundary still stands. Then, check the signal. After receiving help, do you feel free or obligated? If obligation shows up, mark it. And once they realize they cannot buy access, many of them go hunting for something stronger. Shame. Sign 6. They keep circling what you're ashamed of. That shame point is where many people break. After kindness fails to buy access, the next move is often darker and much more precise. They stop trying to be needed and start trying to be feared. Not openly. Quietly. They circle the one subject that makes your posture change. Maybe they joke about it once and watch your face. Later they bring it up again and call it accidental. Then they say something like, "I am only saying what everyone can already see." That line is never random. They are locating the wedge. They want the exact spot where your hidden self-contempt can be recruited against you. This is why shame is such an efficient weapon. A manipulator does not need to invent the blade if you are already carrying it inside. They only need to find where you still believe the worst thing about yourself. A family member might keep framing your old addiction, debt, or breakdown as your permanent identity. Someone you are dating might keep probing your insecurity about your body, your age, your status, or your past, just to see where you flinch. It feels ugly because it is ugly. The Stoic answer is not denial. It is rational honesty. Name the failure without melodrama. Take responsibility without turning yourself into a permanent defendant. Try this line. I do not need that hidden. I own it. I learned from it, and it does not run me. Then keep a flinch log. Notice the topic that makes you rush to defend, explain, or disappear. That is not just pain. It is a possible entry point. And if shame does not break you, the final test is pressure. Sign 7. They watch how you break under pressure. Pressure is the final exam. Once shame stops working as a wedge, the last thing left to study is your structure under stress. That is when people get strangely attentive on your worst day. Not when you are calm. Not when you are prepared. When the project slips, the phone lights up, and 3 problems arrive at once. That is the moment predators wait for, because pressure reveals what polish can hide. A delayed flight. An impossible inbox. A family conflict. A money problem. A sharp email at the wrong hour. Then they watch closely. Do you panic? Do you blame? Do you scatter? Do you start handing away judgment just to make the discomfort stop? It is uncomfortable to admit, but exhaustion makes many people negotiable. The Stoic defense is negative visualization. You rehearse disruption before it arrives, so the event loses its shock value. This is not pessimism. It is structural preparation. If you have already pictured the missed deadline, the rude message, the sudden change of plan, you are less likely to treat friction like an ambush. You can see it when a boss changes direction without warning, and one coworker seems more interested in your reaction than the solution. You can see it when an emotionally difficult email lands, and someone immediately pushes for a decision they know should not be made under strain. Use one rule on bad days. Make fewer declarations and slower decisions. Then score the day, honestly. Did I rush? Overshare? Or abandon a principle under stress? That is where people often misunderstand strength. People often get strength wrong here. They assume guarding your inner life makes you cold, paranoid, or antisocial. It does not. It means you are finally accurate about access. Stoic privacy is not fear of people. It is good perimeter control. A sovereign person can stay warm, generous, and socially capable, while still refusing to hand strangers the blueprint to their weak points. That is the distinction. You do not withdraw from life. You filter entry. The awkward part is that instant openness gets praised as honesty, even when it is just undisciplined exposure. Trust is not owed at first contact. It is built by evidence. The goal is not suspicion. It is a mind that cannot be recruited against itself. Good perimeter control can feel strange at first, because you notice how often people listen for weakness, not meaning. Example: in a group conversation, one person barely reacts to your actual point, but becomes sharply attentive the moment you mention a painful chapter, then keeps circling back to that one detail with the tone of concern. That is the moment the room changes. You realize they are not trying to understand you. They are trying to map where access becomes leverage. That mapping only matters if you train against it in real life. So for the next 7 days, run a simple experiment. Each day, catch one interaction where someone tests access to your inner world. Just one. That keeps it practical and honest. Use a small note with 5 fields. Trigger. Sign. My reaction. Stoic defense used. Score. Then keep the scoring simple. 0 means you overshared, reacted fast, or bent a principle. 1 means you noticed it late. 2 means you noticed it in real time and paused. 3 means you protected the boundary cleanly. Give each day a theme. Past wounds. First reactions. Externals and approval. Compromise attempts. Fake kindness. Shame wedge. Pressure response. Some days will feel obvious. Others will be uncomfortably subtle. That is part of the point. At the end of the week, count one ratio. How often did you protect peace over performance? That ratio tells the truth. Real power is not destroying the predator. It is becoming structurally difficult to manipulate. When you no longer crave what they can dangle, fear what they can expose, or panic under pressure, they stop seeing prey and start seeing stone. Build an inner citadel, not a persona.